Today I will be showing you a mattress stitch seam in ribbing. A mattress stitch seam is used to seam along vertical edges, and today we will be looking at that seam in ribbing patterns. The mattress stitch seam in ribbing is performed exactly the same way as it's performed in stockinette. The only difference is that you need to do a little planning. So similarly to our seed stitch, we have to plan ahead where we are going to place that seam within the ribbing pattern in order to maintain the ribbing pattern across the seam. So here is a seam in 1x1 rib, and the ribbing pattern is maintained across the seam. And here is a seam in 2x2 rib, and again the ribbing pattern is maintained across the seam. So for 1x1 ribbing, the advanced planning that we need to do is to make sure that our left hand edge of our right hand swatch or piece ends with either a knit or a purl, and this one ends with purl. And then you need to make sure that the right hand edge of the left hand piece begins with the opposite stitch. So this one begins with a knit stitch. That way the selvage stitches go away, this purl stitch will go away, and we are left with a visible knit stitch, and this knit stitch will go away and we will be left with a visible purl stitch, and that will maintain the 1x1 ribbing across the seam. I've worked a figure 8 start for my seam, and that ended on the right hand swatch, so I will begin my seam on the left hand side, and I need to find, so this has a knit stitch as its selvage, so I'm trying to find the bar, the first bar that's in between the knit and the purl. And let's see, my figure 8 seam start was started a little too far to the left, so let me redo that. I want to come up directly above the cast on edge, right before that knit stitch, and then I need to come up there. So yes, there, that's better, that's the correct spot. Now I come back up in the same spot. Alright, so that's better. Now I can find that first bar right there, and it is a smile. And then we move to the right and we find the first bar right there in between that purl and that knit. And then, so it's a little harder on this side because that selvage stitch wants to curl forward. And then we move and we're catching every single bar. moving up. We go in where we had last come out and catch the bar directly above. Go in where we had come out, right there, and catch the bar. I'll do a couple of more, and then I'll pull it tight so you can see how that looks. Right there. Then I will pull. Loosen that up a little bit. And there you can see knit column, purl column, knit column. And that looks pretty good. The steps are a little bit different. Well, not different, but you have to do a little bit more advanced planning when you're working with 2x2 rib. You could just end with a knit 2 and then a purl 2. Well, that won't work, because when you lose your selvage, you would end up with a single purl column and a single knit column, and that would not maintain the pattern across. So what you have to do is you have to work an extra knit and an extra purl. So my right hand swatch, I ended with 3 purls, and my left hand swatch, I begun with 3 knits. That way, when I lose my selvage stitch, I still have 2 knits, and when I lose this selvage stitch, I still have 2 purls. Some patterns will be written to take that into account. Sometimes patterns are not written to take that into account, and if you want to maintain the 2x2 ribbing across the seam, you will have to alter your pattern in order to accommodate that. I begun a figure 8 for my seam start here, and it ended on the right, so I will begin on the left. And this is 3 knit columns. So I'm going to get a bar between the selvage stitch and the 2 knits to either side. Other side. There, and then now I've got 1 purl, 2 purls, and then my selvage. So I'm catching this smile bar here that is between the last purl stitch and the next 2. And then the seam is worked as before. Go in where you came out and catch the next bar. Oops, I lost my needle. Alright. And then catch the next bar. If you wanted to, you could end your right hand swatch with 2 knits and begin your left hand swatch with 2 knits and then seam them together, and you would still maintain a column of knits. That sometimes can look okay. You just have to swatch to see what looks better in the yarn that you are using. I find that this seam, though, this is called seaming in the ditch, where you are placing the seam in a space next to a purl stitch where it wants to curl to the wrong side. That tends, for me anyway, to look the best. When I place the seam in the center of a knit column, it doesn't look as nice, in my experience. But again, swatch and see what you like better. For me, this is my preferred method, to place the seam in the ditch, and it hides it a little bit better, I think. Let me do a couple more and then I will tighten this one. Let's see, right here. Oops. And right there. All right. There. See, so you can see how that placing it there curves it away from the eye and looks really nice. It hides the fact that there's even a seam there. Let me bring this one up. So this was done the same way, and this was blocked a little more flat, pulling the ribbing apart some, and you can still, that is where the seam is, right there. So yeah, so that is using the mattress stitch seaming technique in ribbing, and the planning that you need to do ahead of time for maintaining your ribbing pattern across the seam. But it's not hard to do, and just takes a little bit of advanced planning. So thanks for watching.